We're back. It's
Here we
us.
are.
We're back.
You
Me
thought
and
we were
Lauren,
gone.
and Lauren's folks' cats, and we got a whole full house today.
We do. We do.
Just when you
Hopefully
think
they'll make an appearance.
they will.
Yeah.
If you bring the cats on, I'm going to get my dog. So we'll see.
I like it.
Anyway, welcome back, everybody, to our little ongoing series. Oh, I got to tell you a fire and ice story. Remind me when we hang up later.
Fire and ice.
Fire
I'm
and
so
ice.
excited.
I ran across it today, and I'm laughing like a fool by myself. Nobody knows why. So anyway,
but we are fire and ice.
we are officially Fire and Ice now. That is the name of our disco band. So welcome to our show. And
welcome. There will be a
joining
lack
me-
of singing.
there will be a lack of singing. Joining me as always on this side is Lauren Rosen, LMFT, licensed marriage and family therapist from the great state of California. Welcome back.
Thank you. And if
Yes.
you're joining from my end of things, oh no, it's not. You mirrored it, man. You fooled me. I was so excited that I was on it. That is Drew Linsalata, the Anxious Truth, the.anxious.truth on Instagram. Go check him out.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to talk about what to do. This was Lauren's idea, by the way. She gets full credit for an excellent idea. What do you do when you get triggered? Like, yeah. Yeah,
you just stand there and you let the flames envelop you. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, a little bit. I'm not a huge fan of that trigger. I mean, look, triggers are real. I'm not saying they're not real, but I'm always wary of the term trigger because usually in online circles it's used as an avoidance term, like, oh, trigger warning. This might trigger you. Can't get triggered.
Right.
Get triggered. So
that's such a good point. I actually, Kelley, Franke, and I were on Kevin Foss's podcast, Fearcast, talking about just that, the problem with trigger warnings, and that it makes it seem like there's something wrong with being triggered, which is not true. Actually, it's actually, I posted about this just this weekend. It's a great sign. It's a great sign of you're triggered. It means that you are out and that you are living your life. And yeah.
Correct. And a trigger is just an opportunity to practice in the end. So
absolutely.
Yeah, the trigger.
Better.
Okay, so let's talk about it. How do you practice? So the question would be like, okay, now you get triggered. You were hoping not to be. Of course, nobody wants to get triggered, but you do. Your anxiety is triggered. What do we do? So
and we were talking about in the context of going into some examples and like in the context of agoraphobia. You brought up an excellent example of, you're sitting, minding your own business when you get a call and there's a meeting that you have to go to and all of a sudden it's like, oh no, I'm triggered.
Yeah, full blown. Okay, we could use that. We were talking about, okay, we'll try and give a specific example. So we'll talk to agoraphobia. That was definitely my issue. And so typically for me, it would be wake up in the morning. And this is before I was actually getting better and doing what I had to do. And my life was just full of avoidance. It would be like, let's just keep our fingers and toes crossed today that nothing comes up that will force me to do scary things. So I lived in constant fear that the phone would ring or something. I was in the technology business. I mean, I still am, but a little more hardcore at the time. My data center was full of servers and racks and racks and racks of servers, and those things would go down because it happens sometimes. Oh my God, please let there not be a problem at the data center. Please let me not have to go 3 miles away to my office. Please let me not have to, whatever. So typically that's how I would start the day, hoping that I would be able to get through it without having to do anything scary. But sometimes that didn't happen that way. And the phone might ring.
The phone would ring. Yeah.
Phone would ring, or an email would come in, or I would get a text message from the network monitoring systems telling me that there's a problem of some kind and that problem required my in-person interaction. Couldn't do it remotely, couldn't do it on the phone. There was no Zoom. There was no Zoom at the time. So yeah, had to do it. So that was a trigger for sure.
Yeah. So when that happened for you, I can imagine that a lot of thoughts and feelings would come about as a direct result of the email or the phone call, like something like, I don't know specifically what would come up for you, but oftentimes with agoraphobia more generally, it's I have to leave. I'm going to have a panic attack. I'm going to lose control. I'm going to go crazy. I'm going to die. Right.
Yeah.
Like some variation of those fears because I have to leave my home.
Yeah, pretty much nailed it. Yeah. I would immediately, as soon as I knew that I had no choice. So if I was so it was interesting. There would be potential trigger. Okay, here's a possible situation that's going to make me do a scary thing. And if
Mm,
I was able to wiggle around it, I would be able to remote it or something. Well, somebody else could take care of it. Okay, disaster averted.
yeah.
But as soon as I was faced with a potential trigger, immediately my level of agitation would rise. Immediately, my
Mm,
physical level of discomfort would rise. My heart would begin to pound. I would begin to sweat. I would begin to breathe very deeply. All of those things would start to happen. I'd get a little bit derealized and a little bit
mm,
disoriented. So
mm,
even if I thought I might have to go to the data center or get in the car and drive anywhere by myself, I would start to experience that. When
mm,
it did become an actual trigger, like, nope, I really have to do it, those things would ramp instantly into full panic.
mm,
Yeah. So
yeah.
that's a pretty accurate description. I would get very anxious. And then if I knew I got to go, boom, instantaneous panic.
Hmm.
So I would go right from level 6 to level 15. This one goes to
Yeah.
15, like Spinal Tap. So, yeah. So that's what it would look like for me. And I'm guessing that this is probably generalizable in general terms across multiple disorders.
Totally. And I think that that's a good point. Like, if we touch upon how it could be made manifest, if we look at OCD, and I'll even take an example from my own history, because that's the game we're playing today, I think. Is so if when I had my primary obsession when I entered treatment was if I had relapsed on a piece of tiramisu, because I had been sober for several years at the time, and I ate this piece of tiramisu, and I wasn't sure what my intentions were about eating this piece of tiramisu. So I spent, 2 years trying to sort through and figure out what my genuine intentions were and whether or not I had relapsed. And so if I were going throughout my day in the midst of that, I imagine actually driving on the valley, and there's a restaurant that's called tiramisu. And so like I lived in the valley for a time. If I were just sort of like driving along and minding my own business, and all of a sudden I'd see that sign, it would be, oh my gosh, you may have forgotten this, but you might have relapsed on this piece of tiramisu that you ate several years ago. What if you did? Or even eh, that's the wild thing about triggers, is that the longer that you have the disorder, the more associations they build.
Mhm.
And so I could talk to somebody who I knew from my job at California Pizza Kitchen. That's right, I used to work at California Pizza Kitchen. And the place where I ate the tiramisu was at somebody's bridal shower who worked at California Pizza Kitchen too. So if I'm now thinking about California Pizza Kitchen, well, now I'm thinking about the tiramisu, right?
Oh,
Um, yeah.
okay.
Or somebody talks about being genuinely honest with themselves. Well, now I'm like, am I being genuinely honest? So it can trigger you because anything. And at that point, my stomach would drop, my heart would start to beat more quickly, but more than anything, that strong urge to figure things out would just completely overtake me. And I'd either ruminate about it for a while and try and sort it out internally, or I'd make a phone call to one of the few people who was still willing to talk to me about this and ask for some reassurance about whether or not it did constitute a relapse.
Okay. I like, this is really good. So for me, we're talking about sort of an agoraphobia trigger, but really, and I mean, you could probably confirm this as a working clinician. Underneath agoraphobia is very few people have agoraphobia without panic disorder, right? That's
Right.
an extremely rare circumstance. So, I mean, I know it can exist, but it's pretty rare. For me, the panic disorder led to the agoraphobia. So really, it was a
Mm,
panic trigger. It wasn't an agoraphobia trigger. And when
right.
you say that your range of triggers began to expand, okay, now this reminds me of tiramisu. This reminds me of that. This reminds me of that. Same thing would hold true for me. So yes, we're specifically talking about today. I got triggered because I got a phone call and I had to run to the data center in 2006, and I was afraid to do that. But really, my range of panic triggers got bigger and bigger also.
Mm,
An argument, a feeling really happy, I remember the New York Giants won the Super Bowl, and I had a panic attack
Mm.
after the game. It was
Mm.
super exciting. It came down to the very end. They beat the Patriots. Like, eat it, Tom Brady. Like, as a lifelong Giant fan, it was very exciting, but it triggered panic after the game. Yeah. So like that, just
Yeah.
anything, your phone would ring, a different sound, like anything, everything would begin to like, oh no, I might feel a thing, and then I'm afraid of that, and it would just roll into panic. So I agree with you. The
Yeah.
deeper it got, the broader the range of potential triggers. And that's what leads to that avoidance of like, no, no, no. I just have to make sure that I try to keep it on the straight level, no big emotions, no big feelings in my house.
Yep.
That's what we need. That's what today should be. Let's keep our fingers crossed. So anyway,
Totally.
yeah,
Yeah,
good point.
well, and that's yeah, there becomes more and more over time, to your point, to be avoided, and then your life gets increasingly smaller and smaller and smaller. Um, and that
Yeah.
doesn't always happen with OCD. Certainly avoidance comes up as a way to deal with the anxiety, but it's I certainly avoided things. It transcended to fears about it might be contaminated if I was friends or something like that. So avoid
Uh,
going to a party or something that would trigger that. But one way or another, you're even if you're there physically, if you're caught up doing compulsions, whether in conversation with somebody or mentally, you're not really there. You're not. Or if we take something else like being triggered in the context of contamination concerns, you might not go, not because you're avoiding the place, but because you're too busy washing, right? You might not be connected in your life or with locking compulsions, right? You might be over and over again with the door and you're not willing to leave, not because you're anxious about whatever it is you're going to, but because you're unwilling to tolerate the anxiety that would come from leaving.
yeah, that's 100% on that. For my analog on that would be, okay, I have no choice. This is my business. I own the business, and I won't go to it. I mean, that's terribly embarrassing.
Hmm.
But okay, I have no choice. I have to go. And I would just white knuckle my way through it and just grit my teeth. And yeah, I was there, but I wasn't really there, because my
Right.
entire focus was not on helping this particular customer or helping one of my employees or taking care of business. My entire focus was on just trying to moderate and mediate and flatten my internal experience. Right. So
Totally.
that's internal experiential avoidance. I don't want to experience this thing internally, which is triggered by this external thing. So I'll go to the external thing, but it's really, I'm just going to be completely internally focused for
Yep.
my body. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's no way
And
to
I
be.
think I think it generalizes too beyond our two disorders, right? If we're looking at health anxiety, same thing. You get triggered around, you see something that reminds you of cancer, and all of a sudden you're back to trying to figure out whether or not you have cancer.
Mhm.
Um, or when we're looking at specific phobias, like with, let's say, dogs or spiders, that you're going to find yourself avoiding those or then going and getting close to those things, but the whole time you're doing all of these sort of more subtle safety behaviors that are keeping you from being engaged.
Yeah. So then the topic today is technically, how do you navigate once triggered? What happens then? I think it's the $1 million question that most people want to ask, but tell me what to do then.
Yeah,
And normally phrased as, how do I overcome? How do I handle? But can you give me tips on how to handle that?
yeah,
So I think we're probably talking today about is handling. How do you handle it when you do get triggered? Now, too bad. Now the snowball's rolling down the hill. You can't stop it. So what do you do?
right,
Yeah.
right. Well, and I imagine that you and I both have like slightly different variations on how we would go about dealing with that. But from my vantage point, the first step is, first of all, recognizing that, oh, I'm anxious, like, and I'm having thoughts. Because without that recognition, without recognizing that there are thoughts and feelings that are coming up here, that you can't effectively navigate the circumstance.
I agree with that. So there's almost that you have to have an acknowledgement of this is the situation I'm in. And there's almost that has to be almost an objective, which is hard to get to. It takes
Mm,
time to get to that, an objective assessment of what's going on right now. I'm experiencing extreme discomfort and fear because of these thoughts and sensations.
yes.
That's it.
Yep.
That's the end of the story. That's the situation right now.
Yeah.
I have to stop the story right there for me.
Yes.
Does
Yeah.
that make sense? Yeah.
Oh, at 100%, because then if you start going further into the story, you're going to actually end up kicking off more
Yeah.
emotional challenges,
Yeah.
as opposed to just accepting the natural rise and fall. By trying to mitigate the experience, you're actually making it worse.
Well, there you go. So mitigate the experience, I think, is the key here. For me, what I would do initially when triggered was to try to mitigate the experience. Now I
Mm,
have to find a way to bring my heart rate down. I have to find a way to breathe slower. I have to find a way to not feel so flushed or hot or freezing, because I would have these crazy temperature swings. I was sweating and then I was freezing, and it was no good.
mm,
So I would try to actively manage that, or I would have thoughts like, how am I going to possibly get back the 3 miles back home? If I go here,
mm.
now I have to get back. How am I going to do that?
Yeah.
So, and I would start to argue with myself and have what if scenarios. What if I have to call 911? What if I have to call for help? I was trying to mitigate both the thoughts and the physical sensations. So that was my initial response when triggered.
So, which I think leads to that's so perfect, because the next step really is after you've recognized that the thoughts and feelings are present, that you're
Mhm.
not going to do anything to try to fix, control, change them is the next step.
Yeah, but it did require that first step, because the without that first step of acknowledging, no, no, I have to boil this down to I'm thinking and I'm feeling. That's all that's happening right now. I'm thinking and feeling. I would focus on the potential disastrous outcome. I'm stuck at the data center. I pass out. I have a heart attack. I'm dying.
Right.
That's not that None of that needed to be solved, because none of that was actually happening. I just had to relate better to the underlying thing, which was I'm having an internal experience. I'm thinking and feeling right now.
Yes. And I'm unwilling to sit with the possibility that these things might come to pass.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the new way to navigate for me was, yes, I have to acknowledge what's going on. And now I have to recognize that no, 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 I actually have to perform the task at hand now, which is I have to I have to put on my shoes. I have to put on my jacket. I have to tie my shoes. I have to turn the key in the ignition. I literally begin to breaking those things down into the tiniest little, all I have to do now
Mm,
is, was tremendously helpful to
mm.
me. All I have to do in the entire world right now is put my key in the ignition. I had a key in the
Yeah.
ignition in those days. So,
I still
there's
have
no
that.
question. Yeah, me too. 2 cars I have nav keys. What am I gonna say? But yes, all I have to do is this. So instead of being focused on trying to prevent this imagined outcome, I just had to bring my focus back to what I'm doing now and recognize, like, no, my heart is going to pound now.
Mm,
My breathing is going to be ragged. I can try to control my breathing, but not frantically. And if I can't, I can't. I will sweat.
right.
Legs will shake. I will feel disoriented. I'm just gonna have to do these things one at a time while I feel that.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah,
So
that was how I learned to navigate.
yeah, so in terms of like making it a stepwise process as to what we've spoken about thus far, first we notice that we're having thoughts and feelings. We're able to happening, and there are allowing for those experiences to be present instead of resisting them. So while the desire, the urge to mitigate what's happening, right, like that may come up, we're not going to do that. Instead, quite to the contrary, we're going to go toward more thoughts and more feelings on purpose, because in the direction of more thoughts and feelings is life, is doing the things that matter to you, that are meaningful to you, that are necessary if you want to, keep doing the things that matter.
It's an excellent point, because I was avoiding doing things that I really desperately did want to do.
Yeah.
I don't want to be stuck I don't want to hide in my house. I didn't want to worry about the phone ringing. I didn't want to live that way. Yet I
Yeah.
was avoiding the very things that was. I was avoiding the thing that I actually wanted to go toward. As crazy as that is, it sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud.
Well, but that is the power of the experiential avoidance, these thoughts and feelings that we don't want to have. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and if it really boils down, I think, to the goal, because if the goal is comfort at any cost, then of course we're going to do that.
Mhm.
Right? If that's what the end game is, that we just want to feel good, then we are going to be constantly buffeted and battered by our feelings. If the goal is I want to live a full life regardless, then that changes the whole experience, because now you're like, okay, well, I'm going to feel my heart pounding while I tie my shoe, and
Yeah.
I'm going to allow myself to sweat as I walk toward my car.
Yeah, which is what I had to do. So it's funny because when we talk about navigating through the trigger, once triggered, what I and I think this probably holds true for most of the community listening. What I would have told you was navigating was definitely not navigating.
Hmm.
So I think most people, if they're going to tune into this, and this is the clickbait title of the YouTube video, like, oh, they're going to tell me how to navigate my anxiety triggers. They're probably hoping to hear, this is how you calm down. This is how
Mm.
you ground. This is how you make it stop. This is how you make the panic go away. This is how you calm your thoughts or change your thoughts. But that's not navigating.
Mm-mm.
That's
No,
eradicating.
that's a wrap.
Bring it
We've
back to
already been there. We're not gonna
right.
eradicate. We're
We're
gonna
going back to
navigate.
right. So I
Oh,
think what I was thinking was navigation was really focused on eradication, to bring it back to our last video.
that's
Like,
so interesting. Yeah.
yeah, if I look back on that, I'm like, oh, navigating to me was, how do I make this stop? How do I make this go
Yeah.
away? But really, that's not navigating at all. I wasn't.
No, that's such a good point. And I think as you're continually as you are navigating the experience, one thing I want to point to is that you don't stop having thoughts, and you don't like, we've been talking a lot about the emotional experience that sort
Mhm.
of continues throughout, as evidenced by all of these physical symptoms that you're having. But in addition, every step, I imagine, even if you weren't engaging with the thoughts, was you might not make it home. You might have a panic attack. You might, you might get stuck. You might, and I, again, it's choose your own adventure at this point, right? Like, and
Yes.
then I die a horrible death because I have a panic attack while I'm driving and I can't focus on the road, or whatever thing your brain comes up with in that moment. But part of taking those steps, like walking toward your car, is being willing to have this guy in your brain screaming at you that all of these bad things are going to happen.
Yeah.
And the answer from my perspective to that, as you're accepting the feelings, and part of accepting the feelings, accepting the uncertainty, accepting the experience, is saying, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. For me, it was, and this only came from experience, by the way. So I think
Mm,
we could tell you, like, well, here, this is really what navigating truly means. This is what I did to really navigate. But that didn't happen after my second panic attack. It took
mm,
many, many panic attacks. And unfortunately for me, many years of doing it the wrong way and remaining stuck.
mm,
So I can't, it's not like, oh yeah, okay, no problem. I just figured out how to do this. But for me, part of that was not just accepting the unknown, but I would literally begin to think, okay, now show me.
yeah.
Like, I'm so tired of living in my house and being afraid to go to my own place of business that I own. Okay. So every time that little voice would say, oh my God, this has to be something really wrong now. Now it
Mm,
really feels like I'm slipping away. When I would get derealized, it would feel like I was slipping away or disintegrating in some way. This has to be happening now. My response became, I'm going to keep moving forward. Show me then. You keep saying that. Now you're going to have to
yeah.
show me. I don't
Yeah.
know if that helped at all. For me, that was a framing statement. Show me.
Yeah. Well, because
Yeah.
it empowers you, right?
Yeah. But
And
it
when
was
you
easy.
no, oh, no,
Yeah.
that's for sure. But it is, if we're working towards something, then empowerment is certainly something that is worth working toward, and that
Yeah.
actually has sort of a positive emotional output. Not that we do it for that, but the sort of willingness to feel all of that stuff is, it
So in
it
a
feels
way,
good.
it does feel good. And the way I was able to change my definition of navigation, and I swear we're going to get back to navigating, but the way I changed the definition and actually began to more successfully and productively navigate was I had to reach a certain level of fed upness. That's a word. I just coined it.
Yes,
So I had to be
I like it.
annoyed enough, angry enough, just enough of everything. No more. I'm not doing this anymore. That I would be able to frame that with, like, okay, you're going to have to show me this time. You're going to have to kill me. And if you really do try, then I guess I'll call 911 and hopefully they save me. but that's what it's
Yeah.
going to take. 'Cause I'm not going to go
But
back in that office now. Yeah. So
yes,
yeah. Did you have that?
yeah,
Any of that in your, when you changed?
I I had a point where I was like, this is not, I'm not going to let this completely control me anymore. Like, I'm just not. Um, and I think there had to be and it was interesting because I realized I wasn't living my life based on my values or what was most meaningful to me. Um, so ultimately, disengaging from the questioning was me saying like, okay, well, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to have the answer. I'm not going to continue to figure it out. And I think that that was in my own way, my defiance of like, I guess, and I've certainly since and then had experiences where it's like, bring it on, like okay, because, and I think having, Reed Wilson talks about this a lot. He talks about the idea of wanting the anxiety.
Yeah.
And it sort of strikes me as a similar flavor. But I
Okay.
love, but I do really love this idea of like, you're gonna have to kill me then. Like that's the option that I'm taking. And that's essentially any time that I ask a client to accept uncertainty about whether or not they want to murder their families or whether or not they're secretly a pedophile or,
Mhm.
you know, what have you, that I'm saying you have to accept that the worst case scenario is on the table because it's that unwillingness to accept that that's
Yeah.
been keeping them in the loop. And so while it may not be you're going to have to kill me, it's like you may find yourself like, well, if that's it, then I guess we'll see.
Right.
I guess we'll find out. I guess I'll kill my family and go to jail then. And like that's sounds horrifying, right? To somebody, but what is the other choice? And when your brain has basically taken you hostage.
That's great. The hostage thing. Because I think in the end, that's what it was. It was, you'll have to kill me was essentially like, I'm not going to have you drag me up and down anymore. Right.
No.
This is just the way it's going to have to be. But I think, and I wrote about this too, and I wrote my books, like people will say all the time, but I don't understand. I get it. I know I'm not going to kill my family. Like I'm sure most of your clients would say, well, but I know that that's not really true, but it feels so true that
Yes.
we're asking people to accept the unknown or accept the uncertainty of something that in most likelihood, and I know we want to say this, we don't want to do that reassurance thing, but it's not going to happen. But you can't hang your hat on it's not going to happen. But your brain is telling you, no, 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 it's going to happen. So from an
Right.
internal experience standpoint, I am literally accepting death, even though from the outside looking in, Drew, you're not going to die. I know you're not going to die. You're okay now.
Yeah.
But my internal experience is I am choosing to intentionally go and die.
Yep.
That's why it's so hard. And that's why you're having a hard time navigating, most likely. Because
Yes.
to you, it is legitimately you are choosing this horrible fate that you believe is real because your brain has taken you hostage and told you that it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do try to bring back people to the uncertainty because of the fact that we don't want people to live in, oh, I'm going to murder my family because that's also not true, right?
Right.
Like uh,
Right.
you could is really, and like just like you could die. And of
Yeah.
course, yeah, I I think the point that you make about most people know, right, at some level is true. And most people who are in it will say on one level they don't believe it and then on another level they're still terrified that it's secretly true or that they're deluding themselves or so it's a tricky thing and that's where it's like I have to tell people in session this all the time. I'm like, but you don't know, right? That's the problem is I know this isn't going to happen. I'm like, you don't though. And that is what's keeping you stuck is that you don't know and you're unwilling to not know. So you
Yeah.
could say that you know, but realistically, that's just not the case. So let's get better at not knowing.
And so navigation through the trigger when it happens for me was just to kind of bring it back to the original
Yeah.
premise here was the acceptance of, okay, this is what's actually happening. And now I'm now you're going to have to kill me. So I'm going to have to accept this possible situation that I'm so afraid of that has never actually happened. But in my brain, I'm accepting, okay, go ahead, let this happen. And then it was action. Then it
Yeah.
was action toward what I really wanted to do, which in that moment, I didn't want to drive away from the house. I didn't want to do that. But on the bigger picture of my life, that is what I wanted to do. So I
Yeah.
had to choose to move slowly, relaxed, mindfully as best I can. Relax, not calm. Relax and calm are two different things. Try to be relaxed as best I can and move toward things that were actually long-term goals, which is not normal
Yeah.
for human beings. We want to act based on what we want now.
Totally.
It was hard to get into that groove, but it's like, nope, if I go and do this now, I know that I will be happy. I will thank myself in 3 months.
Yes.
Yeah. So that
Yeah.
was navigating. Navigating was, I'm not going to try to navigate through this circumstance right this minute that feels so important. I'm going to try to navigate toward what's
Mm.
waiting for me in 3 or 6 months.
Oh, I love that.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, because what you're talking about too, we're looking at the idea of navigation as a whole, is that you've got your compass bearings on the thing that you want,
Mhm.
and simultaneously that may mean you'll hit a rough patch immediately as a direct result, but you're not going off course, because that would deter you from the things that matter.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and just to sort of bring it back, because I love that you we you know
Try
pull it all back together. If we're looking at it from the OCD perspective and my own experience, that navigating those moments looked like, oh, I'm having thoughts that I might have relapsed, and that maybe I'm lying to myself, and that I'm a terrible person, and that I'll live a lie. Right? These were the things that my brain did. And then I'd have this surge of anxiety and this really strong desire to figure it out. I'd be aware, right? Like, start with the awareness, then go into, okay, this is what's happening, acceptance. And then I would go toward, maybe I did relapse. Maybe I am a horrible person.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm going to live a lie. Maybe no one else will ever know the real me. Okay. Maybe I don't know. But I'm going to keep driving, because that's what I'm doing right now.
Right.
So I don't have time to figure that out. I've got more important things. So I'm going to make space for the thoughts that are here, that I'm a liar and that I'm a terrible person, and I'm going to accept the feelings too, the dropping in my stomach and the tightening in my chest and what have you, so that I can continue on. And it feels risky because I need to sort this out, right? But I'm not gonna. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
and
take the
it feels
risk
risky because it feels like I need to sort this out right now.
right
Like
now.
right now, I need to be focused on the here and now. I'm uncomfortable right now. I'm uncertain right now. I'm afraid right now. So I think if anything, and I don't know if you would agree with this or not, the best navigation tip, the internet is completely chock full of like here and now, feel better this minute navigation tips. So we're not going to do that. You can go find them somewhere else. And I hope you don't. But in the end, the navigation is not in the here and now. The navigation is pointed toward the future. Please don't. Please don't do that. Um,
Please don't. Yeah.
so does that, yeah, that's my, I don't
But-
mean don't watch us. You know, those things are not necessarily productive. So if you came here hoping to find, 10 things to make your panic attacks, I'm sorry that we disappointed you, but navigate toward where you want to be as a recovered person. That's navigation through the trigger.
yes. Take the steps that the person that you want to be,
Very good.
you know,
Even though that compass there's a big
even
magnet behind you that keeps changing your
yeah.
compass. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're having
Like,
internet
hey,
problems,
but
but
wait,
that's
go
okay.
over there.
Just
It's gonna be better. Nope. Oh, we are having internet problems. Well, probably on my end.
it's okay.
And I apologize, gang, but
That's all right. We're at 34 minutes
for
anyway. So
another great chat.
yeah, it's always fun. And these always go a little bit off the rails, but then I think we bring them back. So hopefully it's been helpful for everybody listening or watching.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. I will
And
put up for those of you who do not know Miss Lauren, this is where she is at the Obsessive Mind, or are you the obsessivemind.com is your website too? I remember
That
correctly.
is actually my website as well. Yes, you nailed it.
There you go. So that's how you get it.
And
So if you do not follow Lauren, then go and do that. Oh, I guess I got to put mine up too.
yeah, you gotta put yours up. And this, if you can hear me still, is Drew's information. You can find him at the.anxious.truth. And it's theanxioustruth.com too, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It happens to be theanxioustruth.com. So there you go.
See, there you go.
All right, peeps. Thanks for coming by. I'm sure we'll do this again next month, like we always do. Don't know what we're going to talk about, but we'll be back.
It's going to be a surprise. Fire and ice coming at you.
Coming at you again. So, anyway, all right, guys. We'll see you next time. Thanks for coming
Yeah.
by.
Bye.
Awkwardly end the recording.